Hello, my name is Marti Lopez, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I wanted to tell you about a journey that I've been on the last couple of years. My story started in March of 2014 when I received a letter from Julie Kink, a lady whom I had never met before. The letter started out, "Dear Gold Star family member." It contained lots of information and invited my family and me to attend the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association reunion, which that year was to be held in Kentucky, our home state, during the week of July 4th. I was astonished to receive such a letter. My father, First Lieutenant Jerry Roberts, was a member of the Outlaws Unit, the 502nd at that time. He was killed in action in 1966 when I was 15 months old. My brother, Jerry Vance, was only 10 days old. Daddy's sacrifice was recognized at a couple of medal ceremonies years ago, but I was just a toddler then and certainly have no memory of attending them. To receive an invitation to a military reunion after a lifetime of silence was unprecedented. I was quite surprised but very pleased to be invited. When I received the letter, I started thinking about some of the others whose lives were changed that day as well. I began to think of the Reuter family. Captain Neil Reuter was the pilot, and my dad was the co-pilot on that particular day. They, along with gunner William Mayhere, were killed in action during the same mission. I had never met or talked with anyone in the Reuter family before, but I was curious about them. I wondered how their lives had been and wondered if I could even locate them. Well, we were having snow in western Kentucky, which is extremely unusual for March. School was canceled for a week, and as a guidance counselor out of school, I had time on my hands. I spent a lot of time on the internet doing research. I searched the Vietnam Wall and then stumbled upon a site called the Virtual Wall of Faces. On that site, I found that Neil was from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I then searched a number of databases to find phone numbers of Reuters who lived in the area. After about 30 phone calls, I was able to locate Irene, Neil's wife. We talked about an hour and a half. She was not familiar with the VHPA and had not received any information about the reunion. So I mailed her a copy of the letter that I had received from Julie. Irene and I have been corresponding ever since. I learned that she and Neil had 4 children together. At the time of Neil's death, the children were ages 5, 3, 2, and 1. She told me that her son, Chris, lived outside of Dayton, Ohio, and he might be interested in attending the reunion. Well, he and his family did indeed attend, and we were able to meet for the first time on the 4th of July, 2014. We spent the day together and ate pizza together that evening. The next day, July 5th, we attended a memorial service together, and afterwards we flew in a Huey. This was the first time I had ever flown in a helicopter. It was a real thrill. However, I must admit that I also felt quite vulnerable. The sensation to me was akin to being on the tilt-a-whirl at the carnival. I sure hoped that we were securely fastened in, especially since there were no doors to hold us in. The whole experience was absolutely extraordinary and quite bittersweet. It was even more incredible knowing that we were doing this on the anniversary of our dad's deaths 48 years ago. They were killed in action July 5th, 1966. 2 weeks later, I had the honor of meeting Neil's widow, Irene, and daughter, Linda. My husband, son, and I had traveled from our home in western Kentucky to Chicago for a doctor's appointment. Afterwards, we drove to Milwaukee to watch a ball game, and when the game was over, we met Irene and Linda at a nice Italian restaurant. I didn't realize it until we got in the car to go back to our hotel that we had spent 3 hours together. Amazing to spend that much time with complete strangers. We had never met before, but we shared a tragic link in time. Our lives were forever changed by an event that happened long ago. On September 1st, 2014, members of my family and I were able to meet 85-year-old Dick Leister at Mount Soledad, a military memorial in San Diego, California. Mr. Leister was Neil and Jerry's commanding officer during Vietnam and witnessed the events of July 5, 1966. He was not in the command chopper on that date because this particular operation was supposed to be small. Instead, he was in one of the 4 Maverick gunships and directed the operation from that bird. My family story continued a couple of weeks later when we attended the Venlong Outlaw Association reunion in Washington, D.C., September 18th through the 22nd of 2014. We had learned that this was the unit's 50th anniversary. We knew that this would be our best and perhaps only opportunity to meet some of the men who served with my dad. We tried to register, but registration was closed, and we decided that we would try to take a chance anyway. Mother and I flew to D.C. and met up with Chris Reuter there. We hoped we would meet men who served with our heroes, even if it was only a chance encounter in the hotel lobby. We were not disappointed. We did indeed meet a number of men who remembered both Neil and Jerry. We have also corresponded with others who were not in attendance at the reunion, but who served with them. Many were present that fateful July day in 1966. In addition, in March of 2015, my family and I were involved in an informal outlaw reunion in which a few members of the unit got together in western Kentucky, not far from our home. We had a wonderful time fellowshipping and getting to know one another. It was here that we were able to meet the men who flew on either side of my dad's helicopter the day he was killed in action. The Roberts family, my mother, brother, and myself, as well as my aunts and uncles, were present at this reunion, as were Chris Reuter and his family, and all of Bill Mayher's remaining siblings were present. So the families of all 3 casualties from July 5, 1966 were represented here. It was a very meaningful time for us all. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it says that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. I now would like to share with you a slide presentation showing some of the men with whom I've had contact. Except for one individual my family and I briefly encountered while I was in high school, I had never met any of these men until 1.5 to 2 years ago. But in God's perfect timing, it has happened. Who would have thought that this would have been possible 50 years after my dad's service? Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get pictures from all of the men, but I hope that it will be meaningful to you nonetheless.
Beautiful, far heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. Success be nobleness and ever when I was in school, we used to sing it something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties, over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned thy good. Yes, he did. Every brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this.
In talking with many of the men from the Outlaws over the last 2 years, I've been told that if I wanted to know more, I needed to find Playboy, the crew chief and only surviving crew member from my dad's helicopter. Everyone called him Playboy because they had a hard time with his name. According to others, Pallaby or Palby was from Hawaii. I went through the same process that I had used to find many of the other men and family members, but I had no luck at all in contacting him. In the meantime, after many months' delay, I finally received my dad's military records that I had requested from the National Archives. In them were many forms that he had completed in his own handwriting, the flight records from his time in Vietnam, awards that he had received, and in the back of the packet was a list of Purple Heart recipients from May of '66 to August of '66. Of course, there was my dad's name, Neil Reuter's name, Bill Maher's name, and there, amongst all of the other names, was Laureano Pallaby's name. Playboy's name was spelled differently than any of the spellings that I had previously been given. So with this new information in hand, I went back to the computer to once again search for him. And this time, I struck gold. The search engine listed an address but no phone number, so I decided I would write him a letter. I mailed it on a Monday in late November of 2015, and on the Saturday of that same week, I received a phone call from Playboy. We talked about an hour and a half. The conversation seemed to go well. I found out about his life, and he found out about my life and the lives of my family members. He told me about the day that he met my dad for the first time, and he found out that Jerry was from Kentucky. He recalled saying, "Well, how's old Davy Crockett doing?" And he said, "We just laughed." I laughed too, but of course I didn't tell him that that really should have been Daniel Boone. He told me that he and my dad flew a lot together. He said one thing that they also did was to go through sea rations together. He said that my dad was always looking for the pound cake because that was his favorite. I thought this was funny because my family has always talked about what a sweet tooth he had. Playboy said that he and a buddy of his had talked about becoming pilots themselves and had decided to go through OCS together. But Playboy said, July changed everything for me. He then talked about the specifics of that horrible day when he lost his leg and my dad, Reuter, and Mayhair lost their lives. The fighting that day was so intense it was difficult getting the guys out of there. Playboy said that he lay in the field for 5 or 6 hours, and when he was finally retrieved, he was sent to a hospital in Vietnam, then transferred to a hospital in the Philippines, and ultimately sent to a hospital in Hawaii, where he would spend the next 3 years on convalescent leave. Often in traction, he endured 10 surgeries and multiple bone grafts. He told all of this to me, but still was able to relate some funny things that had happened to him in the hospital. I told him, I've met a number of men, your former comrades, who have been looking for you. I told him I could give them your contact information if you would want me to. He said, you just give me their contact information. That was my first indication that perhaps this conversation was more difficult for him than I had initially thought. After I got off the phone with him, I thought of other questions, and I tried calling him back a dozen or more times, but I kept getting an automated recording with no option of leaving a message. So I decided to write him another letter. In the letter, I asked him more questions about Vietnam. I told him about the difficulty I'd had getting a phone call through to him and asked if there was a better number that I could call. And I gave him the names and phone numbers of some of the comrades and some of the casualties' family members. I sent the letter in a package to him the first week of December. Also in the package was a little memory book that I had put together for my family members, documenting this journey in connecting with all of these men. There were a couple of newspaper articles and some photographs as well. The next week, I received a package in the mail. In it were 2 calendars from Hawaii, 2 lanyards and key rings from Hawaii, and a decorative plate showing the Hawaiian Islands. There was also a card that read, Mele Kaliki Maka, or Merry Christmas in the Hawaiian language, and it was signed Laureano Palabe, but nothing else. There was no note at all. He didn't say that he had received my package, even though I know he did, because the tracking information from the post office showed that it was received. He didn't give me a better phone number, and he didn't answer any of my questions. Well, I've been using that calendar all the course of the following year, and each month as I would turn the page, I would see another beautiful picture from Hawaii. So I said to my husband, Dan, wouldn't it be wonderful to visit Hawaii? So after enduring lots of strong hints and maybe a little bit of begging, he relented, and the first week of July we flew to Hawaii. About a month before we left, I wrote Playboy a letter saying that we would be visiting Oahu, and I would love to meet him if possible. I told him when we would arrive, where we would be staying. I gave him my home phone number and cell phone numbers once again, but I never heard anything from him. Midweek of our vacation, as I sat out on the balcony one day, I started thinking about how tragic it would be if by chance he didn't receive my letter. So I decided to call him. This time, I had the opportunity to leave a message, but again, I never heard anything from him. I think it was just too difficult for him. It has been said that freedom isn't free, and we know that this is certainly true. It was paid for by the sacrifices of all of these dear soldiers who put their lives on the line while defending it. I am aware that any of these men could have lost their lives in service to our country. Many of them had close calls, and many of them, like Playboy, are still suffering today from the effects of Vietnam. My journey over the last couple of years has not always been an easy one, but it has been extremely meaningful, and I'm so appreciative of the part that each one of these men played. In meeting them, I've learned more about my dad and about his time in Vietnam. I feel like I know him a little better than I did before. I've learned that he was a skilled pilot, a respected leader, and a good friend. And I've learned that his life and the lives of these other men mattered to their comrades, and their sacrifice is still remembered by them and honored by them to this day. And my family and I appreciate that so much. I'd like to close by sharing an audio tape that I recently came across. My dad often would send reel-to-reel audio tapes home, and I've recently had those converted to a more modern technology. Most of the audio tapes have been extremely clear. It's almost as if my dad is sitting in the same room talking to us. Unfortunately, that is not the case with this particular one. It's a very poor quality, but nonetheless, I've included it, and I hope that it will be meaningful to you.
But I really would like to wish you a happy birthday, Marty. Marty, do you know who this is? Did you know this is your daddy? Can you say daddy? Huh? Marty, this is your daddy, and he misses you an awful lot. He really wishes he could be there with you. He'll try to make it all up, though, when he comes back. Marty, do you miss your daddy? Do you know this is your daddy talking to you? Huh? Can you say hello to daddy? Huh? Can you talk to daddy, please? Huh? Your daddy loves you. He does. He misses you an awful lot, too.
I love you, America. You see,